Yes, thank you, Melissa. My name is Jamie Meacham. I work here with Melissa in the University of East London as in part with the Centre for Excellence in Learning and Teaching, helping promote learning and teaching standards, helping to promote improvements in learning and teaching standards. We've entered into partnership with EON Reality. We've been working together for just over a year now, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Renah Wolzinger, who is helping us on our journey. As everybody here knows, technology is improving in leaps and bounds. How do we track it? How do we take advantage of it? How do we not let it take advantage of us? And where is the best place to use it? And how do we learn more about it? And to answer all those questions and more, I'll now pass over to you, Renah. Thank you very much.
Super. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jamie. You're such a pleasure to work with, and I cherish that. And thanks, everybody. And I know some of you are dialing in from all over the place. And I saw some of my friends from the U.S. here, so thanks for getting up early as well. So my name is Dr. Renah Wolzinger. I'll be leading the session today along with my colleague, Megan Blevins. We are both very long-time educators. I've been teaching for almost 25 years in digital media, film, and television. And my background is in biomedical engineering with my doctoral research in higher education leadership. And Megan is an instructional designer. And together, we are discovering the world of AI and XR. So we wanted to bring you on that journey today with us from everything we've learned as we do this all day now. It's a very fast-moving, fast-paced situation that we're going to share with you today. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So here we go. So we do, as Jamie mentioned, work with EON Reality, and EON is an education and enterprise platform that works in XR and AI. We're going to go over what that means and bring you on this journey with us today. So, so thanks everybody. Here's our emails in case you want to contact us anytime. And I think this is being recorded as well, but we're easy to reach. So I'm going to start with the evolution of AR and VR and what that means and where we've come. So I started thinking about how is the AI just creeping into everything all of a sudden, and when did that start? I was noticing like Boeing is a big thing here in California, and Boeing actually termed the coin AR, augmented reality. And before that, virtual reality was there. So virtual reality, we know, is like when you see in your headset, you see an artificial background, and then you see models and things happening. And some people later coined that kind of the metaverse, and that is actually fading a little bit. But VR, AR is when you see the real world, and then there's virtual objects in that real world. And virtual things can be models, but they can also be information, knowledge. I think of the movie Minority Report, where portals come up in your real life, or Star Trek, and you're working with those things. In the mid-90s, headsets started to come in with game companies. And of course, game companies have been leading the space in this development using applications like Unity and Unreal Engine. And those companies kind of pushed this ahead and kind of brought this to the consumer market. At the same time, the enterprise market, especially things like medical, I can think of the airlines, because my husband's an airline pilot. They really went ahead and made these things useful for training. And my favorite example, which I've been in, is training for the flight deck. And it's as real as you can get. And maybe some of you don't know, the first time a pilot flies people in a real plane is actually, they train all in a simulator. So their first real flight is full of people. So that's how good this stuff has become. So then I love this. I'm a football fan. I'm actually over there. What I'm talking about, soccer. So a Premier League fan. And the markers on the field are part of that evolution. So you can see markers, but you can actually see people or sports figures over those markers. That's augmented reality technology. Then the Oculus Rift came into being, and that became the kind of crossover into consumer pricing and availability. And then the Rift was acquired by Oculus. And so then you saw the Oculus Quest, and now the Meta Quest being the #1 headset for the consumer market. And then Google Glass came in. So you saw a small market in glasses trying to do things, but the technology wasn't quite there yet as far as like the internet and chip speed. Those are coming back. I attended the Computer Electronics Show here in Las Vegas a couple months ago, and there must have been 50 different booths with glasses that are going to be in AR. So that's definitely coming pretty soon. And then Microsoft got involved with the HoloLens, and that's another popular product. And then XR Technologies, which starts to combine AR and XR. So the history and evolution of what happened here is, I thought it'd be fun to see some visual things, but it really in the 60s was the first kind of idea that you can do this headset devices. And then Boeing being like needing to make simulators came in the 90s and started to work. Okay, you have big simulators and things on the factory floor for training, training and service. Maintenance is a big one as well. And then in the 90s, coming in with military doing a lot of things, and that kind of started the drone technology as well. And then the later 90s, coming in with outdoor mobile games. And you remember things like Pokemon Go in the 2000s, which is, I live across the street from a park, so it's huge here. You'll see on the weekends giant groups of people searching for Pokemon, which is happening every weekend here. So that's a big use of AR. That's actually an easy way to understand it, seeing the real world and seeing objects in 3D objects running around. Then there was a big thing in 2018 with the AR kit, which is meaning you can, as a company or an educator or a designer, you can do a lot more in AR. So now we start to see avatars, different languages, and things on and it works on mobile devices as well. So you start to see this giant use of VR and AR, and really before that it was a lot more expensive because you needed a headset or a special device. Now with the phones being the newer chips on the phones and 4G and 5G coming in, the AR kit kind of took off. So that's kind of where we are now. So whole evolution. And with that evolution, we see the development of headsets, and they're very different. Some of them are kind of complicating, and some of them are less complicating. So the reason that I think like the Oculus or Meta came into being as one of the top sellers, it's heavy for me. I'm a smaller person, but it's kind of a solid thing that it doesn't break so much. And being a teacher in a school, especially, things break a lot, and so some of these devices are really great for singular use, but they might be a little harder to use in a school. So these are some of the devices, and they're different. So the ones that you can't see through the front, those are mostly VR, although now they have what's called pass-through. So when I double tap my MetaQuest headset, I can see through it, even though even though it looks like you can't see through it because it looks like it's plastic on the front, you can. And like the HoloLens, you can actually see AR. So you see everything in front of you, but then you can see objects. So just at CES a couple months ago, I was able to see planets floating in the convention center and then take those planets and move them around. And it is a fascinating experience. And that's very advanced technology now, where you can just do what you would imagine you can only do in movies now in real life, real time. So a couple things that have happened. You might have heard of the term machine learning, and machine learning is something that I've been working with more in the field of analytics, teaching like a computer about like all the credentials in a country or something very, very big, where the machine learning helps you with that data. So this slide is about kind of that evolution of machine learning. That's part of the XR evolution. The biggest one for me here is deep face. So if you watch shows like The Mandalorian, Luke Skywalker, that is a deep face application where you can take somebody's face and put it on another face. So in that show, they take an actor that's younger than he is now, and then the actual older actor does acting, but the younger person's face goes on. It's a combination of 3 different things. And that's a commonly used thing that you'll see now in film and television. But that's because of machine learning, because there's millions of things happening at a time, and you need computer technology to keep up with that. And then the other big one is speech recognition intelligence, and that is being used extensively now in AI now. The second one out of three is deep learning. So deep learning has to do with it's not just, you're not just accessing one website. One of the, I think, the misconceptions about AI now is, well, I can just go to a website and then just, do my research. True, but deep learning is different. It goes to predicting what the next word is in a sentence. So like if I'm going to learn how to, let's say, play chess, which you can see here in the 90s, then I can already predict things that are going to happen and make moves. So it's not just accessing, like I'm a researcher, so it's not just accessing data the way that I'm used to. It's a lot more complicated than that. So for like the last 25 years, I've been training computers on deep learning and how to understand things in context, looking at all of the information at the same time. Two of the big things that came out of that are, we'll talk about them later, is DALL-E and then Google's image recognition. So 3D, 2D model and 3D modeling. So, but I'll talk about that later because I have some models of that. And some of you have heard about neural networks. So that's the background in which this is happening and the research is happening and building this understanding from a computer standpoint. The third one is I wanted to share about breakthroughs in AI. So you may have heard of some of these terms. I think autonomous, we've heard a little bit about that over here. I think about that in terms of driving. In California, we have autonomous vehicles driving around with nobody in them. And it's that was the research going on the last, especially 10 years. And now it's becoming in vehicles. It's still not perfected, as you probably heard. We have virtual assistants. Now we have things like Gato, which is full AI language conversation. So I'll show you some examples of those. But basically what it means is Sophia in 2016 was more robotic. So you'd ask a question, it'd give you an answer. It was more kind of a robotic thing. And now the AI is changing so fast that it's becoming more seamless of almost a personal interaction. So there's a lot of applications for that we'll go over today. So the new things this year are a lot more fluid, and it feels very natural, the conversation, and the information that you get is pretty wild and mind-blowing, which is why it's blowing up. So here's the kind of story of my life, how I got interested in this, starting, I'd say, from the 60s with the original Star Trek. And I always wondered, like, okay, I'm driving my ship, so I'm the captain of my ship, and now I'm talking to this computer and it's helping me do stuff. And then we saw this evolution in all these movies. These are some of my favorites: Space Odyssey, with HAL 9000, the computer kind of taking over and trying to take over the humans, and that's not what we want. So those are things that now we program to try to not happen. But interacting with all these things are kind of AR demonstrations of how we kind of thought this would work over time, kind of visualized here. And then the Matrix being like full on, I'm in another world. So we're kind of where more around where Star Trek and Star Wars kind of perceived, talking to holograms, working with computers, having a conversation instead of typing. So something like that. So now AI is here, and this is kind of my last historical slide. So we have virtual assistants. And so like here, I talk with both of these every day in my life. So Siri, I ask Siri to call somebody. I'm hoping when I do that, Siri doesn't start talking to me. But Siri, Google, Alexa, simple command and answers. Bring up a music playlist, talk about the weather, give me a recipe, give me directions. And then Sophia became more conversational. And then Google came out with something called BERT, which is the neural network. So it understands language and context. I can ask it, something that's much more complex than like question answer, like tell me about something about a story from a certain author, and we can discuss that a little bit. And now we have machine learning and the deep learning. It all came together, and now we work we can work with other machines and answer questions. So that the other thing that got integrated is IoT, which is Internet of Things. In this case, an alarm system, and I put that down as an example. So like the Ring system, an alarm system can recognize something and then send alerts. You can then contact something. So a whole series of cascading events happens with that system. Now we have DeepMind, Gato, which completes more tasks than humans can do at the same time. And now we have, that's this year we released Midjourney, DALL-E, Skybox, and others that are making images in different ways, and we'll go through what those are. And then OpenAI, which is changing the world really fast, and we'll talk a lot about that. And there's a new field for students to study, which is prompt engineering. It's it's almost become the new programming language for using these types of applications. So, and this I'm going to have Megan also chime in, and so Megan, come on board here with me if you can.
Absolutely.
And great, and talk about Discord. So, Megan and I really probably weren't big users of Discord. It's used by all of my students and a lot of new professors where I work, and they're like, "Oh, students are on Discord." Now, I found Discord to be an application that I can't live without. So it's become my new go-to for these types of applications. And so here I have a little picture of my own Discord, and it's basically a super advanced messaging platform, right?
So I was just going to say, Renah, this for those of you that listen to the dial-up tone, this is AOL's chat room reimagined, right? So that's what it feels like to me. So it's not scary to use.
Yeah. So when I first looked at it, there's all this stuff, and being an iMessage type of person, I'm usually like name and then chat, box. So I type text, and now it's like, oh, what's happening here? So what is the reason this became the thing now? Is you can go to OpenAI, or you can go to, like, I have different things there. I actually have soccer on there as well, football for you guys. I have Midjourney, so different types of applications, but you can, people are using these to create content and then test out these prompts. And so what you're seeing here is me on the Midjourney channel, and these are prompts that people are creating, and then the little boxes are variations, and then there's all kinds of people on these. So every time you add another site there, whatever you're interested in, then you can do creation. So why is this now for me required? Because this is where some of the creation is happening. So Midjourney, it's not an application that I download into my computer and do stuff or buy it or whatever. I have to be here on Discord to do it. And so, I mean, on Discord. So Midjourney is happening here, and some of the other applications. And sometimes I just learn, like, what are people doing? Or I search on there, or I go to the prompt engineering thread and see what are people generating there. So I don't know, Megan, do you have any other? I mean, there's
the other thing that I think we see inside of Discord as well is there's a very large community of people who will stream on the community forums. And I found this to be kind of fascinating as my kids were starting to do it, but watching someone else play a game or watching someone else complete a task that you're interested in. So for my kids, they love Minecraft, and they like to watch other people play to get kind of that advanced level. But I don't just see that with them and Minecraft. I also have seen that with people kind of across the board, with different types of different levels of difficulty of the thing that they're trying to do. So it's a pretty interesting space for, here I want to see a really, as an instructional designer, my brain goes, ooh, what's happening here? It's watching an expert in the field, right? It's being able to just log in and watch someone, and through their example, from what they do or don't do, you can learn that much faster how to do the same things in the game or in the tool.
Yeah, so there's a question about, is it like Teams chat? So it's a lot more, because it's actually like each site can have their own programming. So on Midjourney, like I'm learning, how do I do prompt engineering? I mean, that's a pretty complicated thing to do on a chat thing. And what are all the images people create? What's the parameters? What's the things it can't do? I have a soccer site there. So there's like, oh, can I get an NFT? How do I share that with people? What's going on? So it's more than a chat. We're making new things there. We're actually creating there. I think that's maybe the big word. So so yeah. Also, some people said they couldn't see. I just want to couldn't see the presentation. So if you can't see the presentation, I think you can log out and log in, but I am sharing it, so it is in a window somewhere. I don't know if anybody needs technical information on that. I'm not able to do anything different than what I'm doing, which is sharing my slide deck. So hopefully you can see that deck. Let's see. I think okay. I'll leave that to the moderators in the background. So the next step is, what is prompt engineering? Because we're talking about interacting with AI, and how does this work? So I can just say, this is a great example. I want a backpack. So that backpack might be a funny looking, like fake backpack, a real backpack, a fantasy backpack, purple backpack, giant bag. It could be anything. So then it's like, oh, that's not what I wanted, is usually what happens. I get some weird thing I don't like. Maybe I need something more specific. So I'll put a school backpack that's blue. Okay, then I'll get something else. Maybe I want something more realistic, a realistic blue school backpack. So then pretty quick, we're learning, oh, you can make it as specific as you need to, or non-specific. So here's an example that pretty much shocked me about 2 months ago. And I'm, oh my gosh, what is this? So this is like photographers getting on and saying, I want this focal length. I want to use a certain lens, a certain shutter speed. So I'm going, oh, wow, like I don't know all those parameters, which is why I go on Discord. So I go, okay, what are people doing? And I usually go into prompt engineering and learn these and save them. And then I redo them for myself. So this is a very specific one about a fantasy culture of pharaonic and Egyptian bag design, and then with an inscription, all this information, beautiful lighting, studio lighting. So all of these types of parameters. And you don't even actually need to know what they all mean. But if you like the example or the results, you can change Egyptian bag design with something else. Like I could have said, this is a helmet, or this is whatever, a bicycle. So I use these, and you don't even actually have to save them because they're over there on Discord, but you can just look at prompt engineering on images that you like, and you think that's something I would like to make or have the computer make. And so that I now have been studying these prompts quite a bit, and I use them and then usually edit them from there. And that's the same thing I do with coding, to be honest, is usually for what I do, I don't start from scratch, but I usually augment things. So I'm going to pass it to Megan for a second. And what do you think about?
So the prompt engineering for me, there's this always with with everything that's coming so quickly and the advancements in AI, and of course there's always this kind of underlying fear factor of this is going to replace experts, or this is going to replace jobs or understanding or that sort of thing. But prompt engineering, I think, is one of those things where it shows you just how much that expert knowledge is so necessary, and how the students of today are going to continue to grow. This is the beginning of these types of really, really complicated prompts. So it's going past what we might have trained our students to do in the past with, say, a Google prompt. Well, you can't just Google this, right? You can't just use these words. You have to make it more specific or more exact, and then you're going to get a better result. This is no different. The the quality of the prompt you put in is going to directly impact the feedback you get back out. And that's whether it is one of these image generation AIs or it's one of the language AIs. And so in terms of prompt engineering, as these continue to grow and as they continue to get more and more advanced, the students of today are going to need to be able to advance with them. So what I think, as Renah's already pointed out, we see this new field growing of, okay, I have to have this kind of expertise in this area. How do I even build these prompts properly and build these prompts properly for my field in order to get out the quality that I'm expecting or hoping or wanting to see?
Exactly. So as a teacher, I can tell you this is something that I think workers will be expected to know as early as now. So it's something to be aware of. Hop on Discord and start kind of taking a look at prompt engineering.
And I can say if it's happened to us, it's probably happened to other people. So there is definitely we got an email a couple months ago that said, all right, everybody on the team, how are you going to use all of these new amazing tools that are coming out lightning fast to be 30% more efficient? So
right.
that has already happened. And so it will only continue. I think we'll see that trend continue.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just zoomed in on this prompt engineering. But the other thing is, so you can be very vague. You can use, and as time goes by, these prompts are being learned by the AI. So I think actually we'll be able to simplify it, and it'll know better what you want once it learns all of these things. So it's learning these by the thousands a second at the moment because everybody's contributing. And that's probably why, and I don't know this for a fact, but maybe why it's being done on Discord. So that information can be brought in from the world into whoever's working with these applications, and then it's learning. So, but yeah, definitely something to become familiar with and try to make your own. So here's some beautiful images to my eye. Art is individual, but on some of these descriptions, and you can see why the descriptions have to be pretty elegant because, look at these images. So if I just said, make me a castle, you're not going to get a castle at night with the moon and bats flying around and the reflection in the lake. So you really have to think about the imagery. And then the same thing with the person on the right. So now you might be saying, well, this is good or this is bad. But I'm going to say, so I teach art. One of the things I teach is Photoshop, and the artist is super critical. And so, yes, this is AI generated, you could call it art or items or whatever, but it's here. It's not going away. There's certain times to use it and certain times not to use it. So that's where we kind of drive that boat. But I think it's an interesting and important philosophical conversation. And I know that a lot of the artists that I'm training are becoming art directors, so they can draw, but they can also kind of navigate generation of things. So the way I look at it in the real world is this. If you're like in a small company and you're getting an image or something, you're probably doing something like this. If you're doing copyrightable custom art, then in like a bigger place, then you're doing that by hand. And so we don't know where this is going to go, but that's kind of my take on it right now. So yeah, how about you, Megan?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Renah and I were talking about this just yesterday, and this idea that there is the ability, like in a small organization, you don't have the funding, right? You don't have the ability to create everything by hand, and you can't afford to pay someone to create copyrightable art, right? But I can go into Microsoft Word and grab a template, or I can go into Midjourney and I can grab an image and it's beautiful and I want to use it and it looks nice on the page. And so that is just, you can kind of see how tools can be used by different people at different times for different needs.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to answer Robbie for a second. So yeah, I've always searched Google for images, but creating these images, the difference is now I can create things that I had in mind and then make variations and then get to where I want most of the time, and then I can use them. So
Yes.
yeah, and I can use them not illegally. So if I grab somebody's image off of Google, that's kind of stealing an image. These, because they're newly created, is not copyrightable for one thing at the moment, and second thing, you can use them legally everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that that's a block that I have a lot of times. I feel like my mind is very creative, but my ability is not. So to be able to say, I want the castle on the island around the moat with the moon behind it, I can close my eyes and I can see it and I can say it, but I don't have the artistic ability to do it. And so I feel like this is super exciting for me because it opens up doors, I feel like in my own creativity that were previously closed.
So the next one is Skybox, and yeah, okay, prompt engineering. So that was new for me. Sorry about that. Skybox is another one. It's another free app at the moment, but it does 360 image generation. And I happen to use a Ricoh Theta, and it takes beautiful images like this. So I can just do this myself. But in learning, it kind of opens up something. So I asked it to make, I did this myself, modern garage shop for auto repair, and I can see this now in my goggles or with I have these little glasses that go over my phone. I can see this in 3D, and then I can place objects in this environment. So this is a way to have a VR experience in a 360 environment. And so Skybox can just generate that now, which is really amazing. It takes just a few seconds. I made another one here of an office. So if I was having an XR experience or VR experience about business or business presentation or something like that, I can generate this, or I can take my actual 360 camera and go do this, but it gives you another option to create 360-degree images, which is then you can import them into an app such as ours, like EON, and then you can add other things in there, avatars, or not add. You can just walk around in that space and be in that space. So I think that's an important thing that's come up as well. So yeah. And then here's another, just a different 3D of something that's more in the fantasy realm. So walking around a castle, a big giant castle at night, that's completely different. So you can ask it to do anything, just like in the 2D apps. And so these, and you actually, so 360, I don't know if you've experienced that or in a game, it's, all around and you can see behind you the ceilings and floors. So that's
I was just using this to create an experience for working with Mozart and the time frame and Vienna, Austria, and trying to get something to make a setting for the story that I wanted to tell. And so I was able to pull up, and I ended up going with one that was more like the castle one we just looked at. It was a little bit more cartoonish, but it gives you a time and space. It gives you a feeling that you can be immersed in, which is what I was going for.
Right. Right. So here's this reminds me of, it almost reminds me of Olga's Cantina that's inside of Disneyland, but a crazy, crazy lab. So super fantasy, sci-fi things. So again, you can create, it's important to know what you want. So as Megan was saying, so is it realistic? Is it fantasy? Is it abstract? What is it? So that's part of how it understands like where it's going with the image. So that's a crazy 3D image. So people, you can see this, the gamers are going crazy. I can tell you that. They're like, what? I can now have a 360 of my game, stick it in Unity, and then add my characters going through there in seconds. So they're, especially newer gamers, this is for them a huge breakthrough. So now we're in the age of OpenAI. So most of you have heard of OpenAI. ChatGPT is part of OpenAI. So OpenAI is a language model. And so this first version of what I'm going to introduce is called DALL-E. The DALL-E is a 2D art platform where you can tell it, like, I want something in the style. So I can say, I want a tree in the style of Van Gogh, and I need this. And so you can tell it like an artist. whether it's, again, the style, and then DALL-E is producing these types of images. These are very different types of images, so I intentionally put that on purpose. So this one they actually have on their site. I didn't generate these, but it can generate just so many different things. And it was kind of, I got introduced to it in October on my phone over a dinner. It's like, oh, turn on DALL-E and let's make art. And it was just pretty crazy how quickly it works, and how if you give it the right enough parameters, it kind of gives you and stuff that you've never seen before. So I try to put in like my favorite characters in different scenes doing different things. So stuff that's never been, I think just that idea of stuff that's never been seen before that I kind of helped it to prompt was just fascinating to me. So that's OpenAI. So DALL-E is, I'm going to say like free right now, but I think because these are the research stage, I'm sure there's going to be cost associated monthly with all of these types of things. But if you have a chance to hop on DALL-E, you can generate images in just a few seconds as well. So here we are now with the thing that's talked about most in terms of AI in the world, which is ChatGPT. So what is that? So it keeps training itself, and it keeps learning at an astronomical rate. So there are different versions of it. How I learned about this was watching people who have been along the journey. There's a lot of amazing people on YouTube that are professors that kind of study this and look at the parameters and where it is now. And it's developed by OpenAI. It's already so popular that there's a free version, and then there's a version that you pay a monthly fee so that you can get kind of priority and of speed and getting on there and stuff. But why is it so popular? So first of all, it's been trained on 175 billion parameters, meaning it's accessing that information and putting information together contextually. Again, not like looking at one website at a time. It's more like how, well, thinking about solving a problem based on experience. And this is the crazy thing is ChatGPT 4, which is expected later this year, has 170 trillion parameters. So I'm not good enough at math to tell you what percentage of rate increase that is, but it's a lot. So that means it'll be more conversational, access more information, be a more natural conversation. And then the other two down there, DALL-E, that again comes along with these ChatGPT 4, will be more complex drawings, and Codex is the actual coding, so more complex coding. So like if I wanted to do something like send out mass emails and have a Google form, hey, I want to talk to Renah about AI, and that gets sent out and people send stuff back, and I write a Python script to send it to everybody and then handle all the information coming back. I would generally code that, but now I just talk to the ChatGPT, can you make a Python script to do this for me? And then I just paste it in my application. So coding is changing quickly with that capability. And I was told as well that things like autonomous vehicles and the way that they're coding that is mostly through AI. So it's not people retyping, okay, 1 million cars had this problem today. It's mostly like they get all that information and then it recodes it. So Megan, do you have comments on that? On ChatGPT? Yeah.
ChatGPT is that it's a huge leap, I think, in terms of a lot of the things that we've been talking about have kind of, if you weren't in that area, it would be very easy to not, like, I'm not in gaming, I'm not on Discord, I don't do the graphic art, or I don't worry about headsets. Maybe it's something interesting I saw as part of a museum exhibit or at an amusement park or something like that, but I don't, or I don't feel like I interact with it every day, because we have things like Siri, and even on websites where you can buy furniture and stuff like that, you can get into augmented reality by saying, place this piece of furniture in your house and see if it will actually fit. All of that is using those technologies, but it doesn't feel like it, right? It feels more simplified. But I think ChatGPT is the one that really opened the door to its completely in the mainstream. So whether it is, do you want to upgrade your browser that you use to the most updated version that's got this tool integrated? Do you want your messaging service? I know Skype just had a little thing that popped up that said, do you want to use our integration with AI? It's definitely in the middle of mainstream in a way that some of those other tools haven't been, but you can see how that momentum has been building as we've been going through the presentation so far.
Absolutely. So there were a couple questions here. Is photography dead and all of that? So I sure hope not, because my whole life has been a creator. So, but I do think it's important to know, I believe that if you don't become more efficient in things that you do, that you will have the potential to be replaced with people that are more efficient. That's just that happened over time, no matter what. You know, when I started, because I'm older, I started typing, and then computers came in and I was able to do word processing. Well, we swapped out secretaries, and I had a secretary. That's how old I am. So, and she got replaced by computers, but then they did other, she did a different job. And then I remember clearly when those folks got retrained in using Microsoft Office, including my own mother that did that. And she changed from being a secretary to being a word processing and office expert for a CEO. And it was a different job, and it was a good job. And so I just think when these changes happen in a big way, like we're seeing with this evolution, we saw with the internet, we saw with the PC, now we're seeing with AI, that's something that we have to learn how we're going to incorporate it. Jobs will change. There's no doubt about it, but they'll change in a different way. So, my goal is to keep up with what's going on and then make my own workflows more efficient and use my expertise in art and creativity to make what I do even better, which I have already done. So, which is one of the reasons we're here today, kind of sharing how we're doing it. So, this is Megan's. Take it away, Megan.
Absolutely. So what does that mean? So we're a group of educators who are very interested in education, sitting here together at this particular virtual table. So what does this all mean for us? And I think that the very first thing is directly addressing these AI tools with students, because this is their future. It's all of our future, but specifically for the people that are being trained to take on the next generation of the workforce and to go into the workforce. Like I was just describing, if sitting in the workforce right now where we're already being asked, how are you integrating this to make you, human being, more efficient at what you do? I think directly addressing these AI tools with students is absolutely critical. They need to understand that they exist, what they are, and how they can leverage them to do the tasks that they need to do, because people are going to expect them, especially as this continues and gets more and more involved. People will expect them to be able to use these. I wouldn't shy away from AI tools in the classroom. I would definitely incorporate them, because again, they need to know them. And if you shine the light, then nothing can hide in the darkness, right? So if we shine the light on AI as educators, as leaders in the classroom, then what we are doing is helping students see this is the way to use these things in a good manner, in a way that is going to be helpful. And you can directly address, I know as soon as ChatGPT came out, it was that knee-jerk reaction of, oh my gosh, everybody's going to use it to cheat, and Chicken Little, the sky is falling. And I don't think that is a good approach. It is an opportunity, though, to reflect on what your teaching is and what it can be. So this idea that we can use these tools, because AI is a tool, right? And we can use it to our advantage to do things like prompt engineer. And I don't want to jump ahead too much because I have another slide or two on this, but we want to look at this as something that we can incorporate with the tool, like we've been incorporating the tools like the internet and the computer and all of these other technology tools that have come around. All right, so this is my favorite, is this idea that we have everybody that teaches has a desire inside of them. I think the most common thing that if you ask a new teacher, why did you go into the field of education? What was your desire? And it was to spark that aha moment. It was to see learning happen in other people. A very big desire for kind of letting that creativity go. And so I think that what we see in terms of AI is this is an excellent tool. So, okay, Megan, great, you called it a tool, but how do I use it? How do I use it as a teacher? And so we can jumpstart imagination and we can use it to be efficient. So we're looking at things like, I can now personalize learning for individual students. I can have content created in the blink of an eye. I can adapt and provide accessibility to lessons or experiences that might have never been able to be done before. And what does that mean, right? So I can take my lessons, and let's say I have a student who, for whatever reason, cannot participate in a particular activity that the rest of the class would be doing together. Maybe it's a distance thing, but maybe it is also just it's not safe for them, or their ability does not allow them to participate in the way that other students participate. Now I can create a virtual or an augmented reality lesson that allows everyone to have an experience and everyone gets to participate in it. And so I think of one of my favorites is the Magic School Bus. And I think, all right, Miss Frizzle, where are we going? Let's get in the bus and let's go explore, because these tools are opening up this ability to create things in a way that we have previously not been able to create for ourselves.
Exactly. I just wanted to make one comment with the chat that's going on really interesting is, schools that are banning this, and I can understand the whys and why nots, but and if you look at, I love history, and one of the things in history is when new things got created that are highly adapted, and this is the most highly adapted piece of technology ever, is you're not going to be able to just throw blackout curtains on it. So I think it's better to understand, to learn how to adapt, work with other people, and then things are going to have to be adapted in curriculum and assessment. And we're going to go over some assessment stuff in a bit, so I'm going to hold on to that thought for a minute.
Yeah, and to the point of it's okay to go to the next slide. And to the point of it being banned in particular places or on school networks, sure, but then they go home, or then they grab it into their pocket or their purse and they've got their own phone, and that is not restricted, right? So I think, yeah, that's a whole nother seminar of, that kind of conversation. So just furthering that idea of how do we use this AI tool as educators, and as an instructional designer, I have been working on my own prompt generations of how do I create something like, I want to create this lesson or this understanding. I want to create a course. I want to create this, but I want to use a particular model of instructional design. Just like you can tell just like you can tell the tool, I want you to create an image, and I have all of this really specific example of the different kinds of shutters and lenses and lighting for photography. That art of instructional design is really very much the same thing. So if you just ask Chat GPT, or if you ask the OpenAI to create a lesson, it'll do it. And it does it because it knows that it has studied the patterns of speech. And so it's looking at how people usually talk about lessons. So if you ask it for a lesson, it's going to give you a structure that's more or less like, yeah, that's a lesson. That's a structure of a lesson that works. But you can get more in the weeds of it, and you can say, okay, act as an instructional designer and use the Gagne's 9 events of instruction, or use the Dick and Carey model of instructional design to create this workshop or this training or that sort of thing. So when we're looking at AI powered lesson plans, it can write all of that stuff for you immediately. And that's not the end. And that's part of that conversation, I think, that's so important to have with students as well. Because yes, AI can generate all of these things, your COR, your course description, your objectives, your lessons, your policies and procedures, your grades, and it can make you super efficient at creating those things, letting you do the more fun stuff, right? Letting you do those more creative things, the actual working with students, as opposed to the laborious creation of documentation on what I'm doing, right? So it's not show me that you're doing what you say you're doing. It's you actually get to go do the thing that you're doing. But it's a jumping off point. And so you as the professional educator then have the ability to go back and look at what it's created and say, oh, that was a good start to that. I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think I like it a little bit more like this. And now you can go in and you can tweak and hone things to be what you want them to be. Could you click forward one?
Yes.
Renah? All right. This is the other fun stuff that we inside of the EON platform where Renah and I play every day. This kind of stuff is popping up in what we call the AI report. So that's how we've decided to integrate that AI into the software. And so it creates these different things for you just based on the prompt that you give it. But as you can see, there are things in there where you might be like, I don't really want it to create that for me. And that's okay. You don't have to let it do that. But then there's other things you look at and you're like, ooh, actually, I don't like making those. That's not very much fun for me. And so you can let the tool do that for you, or at least, like I was just saying, be that jumping off point that you can then use to go into create things more robustly.
Yeah, I was going to say on this. So I think a breakthrough in my mind on this slide was when I first took one of my course outlines. I took my most complicated one, which is audio post-production, like how to add sound effects and music to movies. And I put it just in the little chat box. My guy, shh. Then I'm like, okay, what would that look like if I had a 16-week course? So make like an outline of modules, and it did. And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. I'd love to have that as a reference. Maybe it's not perfect, but I could at least start with something. Then I asked it, here's where my mind went crazy. I asked it to make, based on the modules, I went into some more detail, like, how would I make sound effects with Foley and generated information on certain lessons for me. Then at the end of that, I said, make a quiz based on the above information. And you know what? It was great. And that really shocked me. I was like, what is this? So I'm not great at making quizzes because I know the right answers. I'm really bad at making up wrong answers. And I was like, wow, this is like better than my quizzes. I think that single moment is like, this efficiency is good for me because I know where my weaker points is in my teaching. I'm good at teaching. I've been, I have a big following for 25 years, but there's certain things I'm not great at. And quizzes are one of them. So for me, or like discussion prompts, like I might put a pretty simple one. So I said, make a discussion prompt, based on different types of, audio post-production and Foley engineering, whatever. And they're really good. Sometimes maybe my stuff is better based on my experience. So if I want to be like, okay, in my lesson, I'm going to teach about what it's like to be on a film set, and I'm going to be like the grip, or I'm going to be like the camera too, whatever. So those things are, my experience, and that's what, why people come to see me as a teacher is my experience. People want to have that, what's it like to write and compose for a short film, and what's an award-winning composition look like. And so those are things that I interject, but there's a lot of other things that I can save time for myself. So what I'm learning to do is what are those things that make it more efficient for me? Like if I'm in Moodle, like just creating that whole outline of all my weekly things and my schedules, things that go along with my materials are incredibly helpful for me, incredibly time saving, and some of it's better than what I did on my own. My teaching is never going to be replaced. And if you're a good teacher and you value, this is not going to be replacing me as a teacher, but definitely making my my life less painful. A lot of the things that I do outside of my teaching, like the prep. So yeah, I just want to mention that one moment for me with the quizzes was just ridiculous in my brain. I wasn't complete. I think I emailed you in the middle of the night, like, Megan, look at this quiz. It was like,
look at what it did. Look at what it did.
I think I was completely shocked. I didn't even know you could. I could take my whole course outline and put it in there in the chat box, and it just read it. The other thing I learned about this is I could put my website, like for my class or whatever. I could just put the link in it, and then it immediately knows all the content in my website. So it contextualizes a lot of stuff that I'm generating for me. So let me go to the next slide. All right, so this is me. The other day, what happens when you talk with in the AI? So now applications can save that information. So this is just saving information with references, a lesson plan. This is about the Space Needle. And actually it's a lesson that Megan made. And I had a little chat with the AI and it saved all this information. So it can go in thin air, or if you work with a program, you can save everything. So now it's generating like, okay, you got the Space Needle. Here's all this information I'm generating for you. Then it's up to you as a teacher. Do you want to use it or not use it, or kind of use it as a guide? Any of those things. It's just another resource. It's a tool. So that's just me bringing in a model about a Space Needle, and then it's doing Q&A and writing some information about it. So, some resources. So this is, I would say, Rev A of a million different ways that this can be done. But you can think about this like in enterprise. Let's say I'm teaching how do you use an X-ray machine or an MRI machine, and it could be like, here's the machine. I could feed it like all the manuals. Here's how you fix stuff. Here's like whatever all of this information is. But the purpose I made the slide is just say that the conversational things or the models or the art doesn't have to just be a instantaneous thing. It could be saved and then reused for different information. So in this case, I'm using supporting information around a 3D model of the Space Needle in Seattle. So,
yep. And I like how Beth in the chat was talking about having OpenAI create an introduction to AI with the AI. And I love that. Yes, cool. Absolutely. Make that thing work for you. There was I was following all of these advancements really closely over the last few months, and there was another person who is like, all right, so if the student can use this to create the essay, can I then as the teacher use this tool to grade the essay? And you can. So the ways in which you can use it, again, prompt engineering is huge. If you just say, grade this for me, it can't. But if you generate into a good prompt that is kind of getting that information from it, right, like a sculptor with clay, then you're going to be able to get it to do a lot more for you.
So the question was, Robbie, that's a great question. So is this ChatGPT? I'm going to show you that next, but this is a response to ChatGPT. So and it's using OpenAI to generate information. So I'm bringing up a model that OpenAI understands. I'm bringing up this model. It understands what it is. And then I've pre-programmed it to say, I want these elements. I want a quiz. I want prompts. I want information. So Megan and I think we're pioneers, Megan, have come up with this is like Rev 1, like this is, baby steps. What would it look like to provide good supporting documents after that experience? So maybe you had questions and answers with an avatar and all. So we've come up with this as our first evolution of that. So it could be anything. So, and Catherine, I'm going to go over the alternatives there's a bunch of alternatives in a minute, but so yes, this is generating from OpenAI, but based on programming that we've done to define the supporting documents that we think are helpful. But again, it's just, we're learning along with it. So we're going to, but I want to show you like what that looks like so far. But this, on the other hand, is ChatGPT. So I asked it, okay, something outside of my field. So I was thinking it, because I'm planning a corporate event, and I'm thinking, okay, what is it if I was doing this corporate event and I'm teaching tourism, what does that look like? So I asked it about food service planning for a one-day corporate event. So it gave me, this is me and live chat GPT. And in fact, you can hear my television in the background a little bit. So it gave me like lesson content. So things, you know, and it looked good, pretty good to me. Of course, I don't teach the subject. So someone that taught this could be like, okay, that could be good or bad. That's up to you. You're still captaining the ship. You're still the teacher, but it gave me, you know, identify the goals and attendees, budget planning, menu planning, some things, logistics. So that looked pretty good. And then activities to do with the class. Then so I asked it another thing. And this is one of the things about, it's a conversation. So it's not like an all-in-one. So can you create a module to go in Moodle for this lesson? Then it did that. So it created this module, welcome to food service planning module. And it goes through some things there. And then the lesson content. Let's see, I probably shouldn't hit pause. So menu planning, service style. So it goes through some of the content there. And then the logistics, considerations, and then it gives me some activities. So then I asked it another question, make a quiz about that. And this is where one of my favorite things, I think it does really well. And then discussion prompts. And then I asked it, for a sample menu. So it gave me like the menu. And I asked it for a one-day budget. So that's like a whole lot of information in about 5 minutes or less that it gave me. And I think that's pretty good. So those are the same types of things I do in my own field in audio engineering, where I ask it questions around like mixers and sound frequencies and things. Oh, then I asked it to design an invitation. So no, I knew this is not going to design the graphics, but it gave me like some ideas on how to design it and what are the parameters. So I was curious what it's going to do if I ask it to do something that it can't do. So it says, I'm sorry, it doesn't have the ability to create visual images, but here's the kind of stuff you should include in that exercise. So that's how it handles that. Then I would go over and take that over to, drawing it or doing something on a computer or using OpenAI or something. So that's ChatGPT. And this is, I don't have an account. This is just my free one. Then I asked it what types of jobs are available with estimated salaries in London for hospitality and tourism. So, and I don't know this because I don't know salaries in London. So it is what it gave me. It's something that my students always ask, like, oh, well, what can I do with this? And how much am I going to get paid? So that would be something I'd want to put in my lesson around labor market. So, and then again, up to me to like kind of see if that's realistic or if I want to hone down on that or whatever I need to do, or those are old information or it could. So that's where you have to be as a professor, like go in there and then decide like what's useful, what's not, what's accurate, what's not. That's the kind of the harder part is you definitely need your knowledge. It's not like this is replacing anything. It's just another tool. So, but I do like some of the stuff. This is still my favorite, like quizzes and prompts. It just nails this stuff really well. So, and then even these informations, like it's not giving me a ton of information. I can ask it more about these, but I've got an idea. Okay, this could be a really good idea for some of the content that I want to use in there. Anything before I go on, Megan, anything else on ChatGPT? Because I know you've been using it a lot as well.
No, I think you've covered it.
Okay. All right. So then the next thing is where I think this is going is 3D models. So one of the things in learning and combining AI and art is 3D models are have a lot of components to it. So they have like kind of the bones, the structure that you call it like line drawing. And then that in 3D is kind of a series of information like dots and vectors. And then it has to be textured. So texturing is all that painting and everything. So we're not there yet, but it could actually happen this year. And for those of you who do 3D printing, you know that other thing about 3D models is you want them to be layered or in pieces that you can take apart and put together, or layered so you can print. So right now we have, we're doing this still by hand, but AI is creeping in. So I use one called Blender. I'm a CAD designer, but now I'm using Blender. I'm not that good at it, but it's a free 3D modeling app. It's actually supported in the background by Microsoft and other big companies, but you can bring in things and add and basically paint it, add the lighting and all that in 3D. What Blender is done already with AI is you can add a module, free module in around texturing, and it does like stuff that used to take a couple weeks, it can do in like a few minutes. So it's not that it does the whole thing for you, but it's making processes in there faster. And that's leading to kind of doing the whole thing eventually. And I think it's going to happen this year. There is OpenAI has Point E, which you ask it about an image and it generates kind of the bones. And then you would have to take this into a program like Blender to retexture and finish it. So it's, you know, that we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. And these are called single mesh. So they're not in different layers. You can't take them apart, but it's starting to generate pretty good 3D images. So we're on that road to kind of 3D image generation. And then here, I made a little quick video of this. You can see it creating, I'm doing a little wipe across here. This is from Magic 3D. So when you see that uncolored, that's the model it's generating. Then the textures are added after. So that's what those look like. So they're kind of 3D single mesh items. The castle's a good one. You can see what it looks like. And then with the textures, it looks completely different and finish. So that's how 3D model generation is. There's one at the Opera House down there, an astronaut. So that's NVIDIA's Magic 3D. That's all part of the same stuff here, OpenAI. And so that's something that, so what I did is I downloaded these. You can download them and I put them in Blender to see about how to texture them. So you can do that as well. And I think where we're heading that is on the bottom says prompt-based editing, where you ask it to generate like the Opera House, and then you explain the texturing and it does that. So that's the direction that I think we're heading in. So why is that important? Because in 3D modeling right now, the biggest holdback in XR and gaming and everything else is just the money it takes to build models. And everybody in art, you have your own idea. So like, let's say me, who's not a inherent 3D modeler, and I want to make a spaceship in a certain way going across a certain planet and all that, and I don't have that 3D object right now. I can go find something similar, or maybe I didn't find it. But if I had the ability as a not 3D designer to have something that generated that I really want, now in a game or in a learning activity or in the XR environment, I can have that. And when the AI can generate that and it can be in layers, then it solves a problem that we have now for most educators. Most educators are looking for specific things from their classroom and they can't find that exact thing. So I'll give you an example. In my world would be like a 96 channel analog mixer for audio, a very specific piece of equipment. I want to teach on all these complex things, but not a lot of people teach that. So that model's not available. But if this comes around, I can say, I want this thing. I can even probably feed a picture of it and then it generates it. That's going to be a giant breakthrough in education and in enterprise, guaranteed 100%. So that's why this is super, super important. So what does this look like? I'm going to explain a little activity I made when putting this all together, AI and XR. I'll show you this little application that I made. This is about robots. So I did this in my house. And the robots are going to come in and I'm able to find some 3D models and then put them in my house. So I'm just using our application with EON, and then we take these models and I'm going to use AI to interact with these robots now. So I'm just going to place them in my house, and then I can have the AI as I walk by this sci-fi gate, it opens the door. So I can tell it, okay, as I walk by, using my proximity and then open the door. So I'm just walking through there. And as I walk by the next one, I can't remember what I had it do. I had it animating. And I walk back by this next one and it's playing the piano for me. Fun effects. And then I have it doing effects. So what are you looking at here? So it's, I'm using AI to do some things. I'm telling it where I am. So like every time I come back in my hallway and if I want to bring up this experience, it remembers spatially where these objects are. It's remembering what they're supposed to do and how to do them, whether I'm passing by or touching something or whatever. So this is now combinations of using AR and VR, which is XR, and then using AI to kind of have these different things happen, which in this case is animations and sound effects and things. So that's a little demonstration of something that could be really useful. Like maybe you're running around in like in a hospital, and you like certain things happen when you grab a certain piece of equipment or you turn on a certain machine. So this is just a little fun demonstration of that. So I made a little, and here I'm picking parts and I'm telling it to remember when I touch that part, I want an animation. So I'm just picking the animation and doing that. So it's brand new use. Instead of just having models you can take apart and put together, now you can interact. And that's kind of the concept of what, like things that I teach is I don't teach things where I'm assembling, disassembling. That'd be more like my engineering classes. I'm teaching things that I need to do in on a film set or in music or something like that. So that's what this is. And it's just me going through that experience. Another demonstration I made is looking at DNA. So I can bring in, I can talk with the avatar. So I'm going to let this play here. Welcome to this experience with the EON. Whoops, sorry, I messed that up. Sorry. Welcome to this experience with the EON AI Assistant.
Hi, what do you want to learn about today?
I'd like to learn about DNA.
Now I'm going to create a knowledge portal for you.
My AI will now create my knowledge portals, which takes a few seconds. So what is a DNA sequencer?
A DNA sequencer is a scientific instrument used to automate the DNA sequencing process. Given a sample of DNA, a DNA sequencer is used to determine the order of the 4 bases, G, C, A, and T. This is then reported as a text string, called a read.
So how does the science actually work? And can law enforcement use it to help solve cold cases?
Extracting the DNA from the cheek swab or saliva samples and purifying it. We need to get pure, high-quality DNA from the samples. Otherwise, none of the tests are going to work.
So here I can choose tools. I'm going to choose animation and smoke, denoting a problem with my machinery.
Hi, let's modify DNA lab machine.
DNA. Now I can go back anytime and add additional content to this experience. So what are some forms of DNA?
DNA exists in many possible conformations that include A DNA, B DNA, and Z DNA forms, although only the DNA and Z DNA have been directly observed in functional organisms.
Now I'm creating an anchor, so I can find my object at any time in the following year. This is great in museums, on trails, in a classroom, and so many other situations. Now I just turn on my application and all of my objects appear where I left them. And there you see my animation and my smoke that I chose from the Interact tool. So what's happening here? Let's just talk about that. So the main thing is, there's 2 main things here. I'm using OpenAI to recognize the name of the model, which in the first one was a DNA sequencer and the second one was DNA. And then the second thing was it brought up information that I can keep or replace. In this case, I chose videos, images, and text to come up. And then now I can have a conversation with it. So that, and there's different ways to do that as well. You can pre-do questions and have it just answer those if you want to control it, or you can have an open conversation. So that's up to you But this is where information is going, whether it's education or enterprise. I could be asking it, bring up the manual to fix X part in this machine that broke, and then it brings up the information and explains it to me, and I can ask a question. Which part number do I need for X, Y, and Z to replace? So this is changing both education and enterprise very, very quickly. So I wanted to show you that example. I used it because I actually got to meet Watson and Crick working in a veterans hospital here in California. And so I wanted to do an example of DNA. And I used to repair MRI machines and CAT scanners. So something that I know a little bit about. So I'll pass that to Megan. That's a couple of my examples.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the way that we see these tools being used then it's kind of the door is open to use it in a variety of different ways. If you think of that idea of, I can now give AI a series or a set of information, or AI has been trained on this set of information. And now I can, as an educator, I can talk to it, but more importantly, my students can talk to it. So I can create something and then multiply myself however many times I need to, and my students can then go in and they can interact with and ask questions of and quiz themselves on the different things that I'm trying to get them to learn and understand. I think in terms of when we look at, okay, that differentiated learning for different students. Some students might pick up on the concept right away and they might get things right away. And my quizzes that I can add into experiences like this will help me see as an educator almost immediately. Okay, this group of students, they got what I was going for, but this group of students is still struggling. I can either, as that professional educator, then choose, do I move these guys along who already have it? Or do I work with the students who are still struggling? Do I let the experience work with them and I just have them keep going through the content? I get now that professional latitude to be able to say, okay, I think in that way, it really takes that idea of a flipped classroom and takes it to the next level. To differentiation. Mm-hmm.
So I'm showing a little example that I did last week at the Reagan Library here in Southern California, where
it was nothing
had a conversation about the ex-president. But what's different now that we figured out we could do also, and this is really good for teaching, is label real things and just putting content out there. I call this kind of the Minority Report thing. So I can attach content to real objects. So in teaching nursing, we've had a lot of requests for that, like labeling all the different parts in the clinic, or like understanding different types of tools and things. So I used the library as a great example where you can anchor experiences, and then you can have a chat with OpenAI and learn more about those things. So here's me having a quick chat about Air Force One, for example.
The former actor and governor of California, Reagan was the first president to fly.
So I just had it,
which was designed specific.
So I thought this was pretty cool. So I brought in my own model of Air Force One, which is a 747, but Reagan flew on the 707. So I was looking at the differences between those, and I was able to anchor that experience inside of the museum. And then you can see my labels there. I labeled the real aircraft as well. So it's a different use of AI, but because now if you use a AR device, it can recognize things that are in front of the camera, in this case, the airplane. So in that case, I can add labels to parts, and then I can add content to those labels. They almost become like little websites on real things. So I was running around doing doing fun stuff in the museum, but for learning in the lab, like for me, this is like completely mind-blowing that I can do for like my film set stuff and like lighting plots and camera plots for my complex mixers I use in audio. So I can label parts and students can learn about them and watch information about them. Cockpit training, this is the similar thing where you're labeling all the different buttons and then learning about the context of each of those, which is the way the pilots do this before they ever hop into a cockpit. They learn all about everything, exactly like you're seeing here. So that's why this is taking off again in enterprise.
So in a clear and logical way.
It's a really important point, the whole thing on pilot training, because they right now are been using just videos to learn before they go in the simulator. And that's they have like a monthly requirement that they do on the extended learning, and it's been videos, and now it's switching back to AR and VR before they get into like a simple simulator, then the expensive simulator. And that's a lot about time and money. So I did this whole experience, while I was in the library last week. And so that's pretty much the latest of technology labeling, having the AR understand real objects and learning about them in real time like this. So that's
this one is really exciting.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of application to this, and even on, I think of on a college campus, and you're new to that campus, or you're new to that area, and you want to know about a particular building, or you want to know about a particular place. And so there's use in the classroom, and then use outside of the classroom, but still in that holistic journey of the student.
Absolutely. And I know we're at the end of our time, so I'm going to cruise through these last couple of things. These are where we're seeing this, happening, really changing training and education in the workplace, real world simulations like you just saw, remote education, and real personalized learning. I think we're going to ask those questions and answers. So now we're at that merge of XR and AI, and which is what our examples were about today. So it's changing education, it's changing training, it's changing the way we work and the way that we do things in a kind of a more efficient way. And this is kind of my favorite ending slide, the future of education. It's not just about teaching and learning, it's changing research, the way we acquire information, the way that we do student success with counseling, with retention, engagement is a big one. Recruitment, because now we can use this to find people and recruit. A lot of different changes in security, data sharing. So all across the institution, it's a lot more than just future ready skills and in content. It's the whole thing. And so one of my favorite things I did in my doctoral research is redesigning schools. And I'm at that point again where I'm really thinking about what does this look like in the future. So this is a slide by Microsoft, and I think it's kind of explains the whole landscape change. And I asked GPT, just as a thing to share with you all, the spending, just to give you the impact of this. I asked it to make me a chart to compare XR spending versus AI spending, and it's pretty much off the charts on both of those things. But AI everybody is all in on getting that because they see the efficiencies, and so we're undergoing a transformation that I encourage everybody to be a big part of. And here's our contact information. We're excited to talk about this anytime and share with anybody. So with that, I'll stop sharing. And I know we only have 5 minutes left, so we have some probably questions and answers. So I want to thank Megan, especially for joining me today and helping with this presentation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Renah. Thank you, Megan, for an interesting talk. I'm sure that people will have comments. I know that some people have had to leave already, but if anyone has any questions or comments, please do put them in the chat or email us, and we can forward that to you if that's okay. But thank you for waking up so early to be with us today.
You're welcome. I hope you found it as inspirational as we do, and make it a little bit less scary. And yeah, definitely, we're here. We're learning every day as well. So please keep in touch.